But Kyle Samani is managing partner of Multicoin. Multicoin is a multi-billion-dollar investment firm in the space. He has been early in a whole number of projects, DePIN being one. And I was thrilled that he led Fluence, the Fluence Labs Series A. So appreciate that. Thank you, Kyle. And I wanted to talk to Kyle about DePIN today and also about Fluence. But first, let's talk about DePIN a little bit, because you've been early in a number of sectors. You've been early here. You were in DePIN before it was DePIN. So can you talk about some of the early investments you made and kind of how you think about them?
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kyle, co-founder at Multicoin. Honored to have the chance to back Tom, you, and Evgeny, and the rest of the Fluence team a couple years ago, and it's exciting to be here at Denver at DePIN Day on the day of Fluence's token launch. Is the FLT token live yet?
Yes, it is. We haven't talked about that yet, but it's coming soon. Coming soon.
Sorry. Whoops. Okay. So DePIN. So we were super fortunate to have a chance to invest in Helium 2019. And I think today that's kind of one of the leading teams in DePIN, especially physical side. There's a few teams who are focusing on DVIN, or virtual infrastructure networks, a little earlier, like LivePeer, Filecoin, some others. We had a chance to meet Amir and the Helium team in 2017, and had a chance to lead their Series C in 2019, and then they pivoted to crypto. What really drew us to first to Helium at the time was, Amir said, "Look, man, like, I want to build the world's biggest, best telecom network. Doing that's going to take $100 trillion of capital. I don't want to raise $100 trillion of capital, but I want to enable all kinds of random people to build all the network." And that really struck us as just like a huge, huge idea, where you could take all of this traditionally very capital intensive, top-down, centrally managed processes and basically let the market naturally distribute. If someone lives in a neighborhood and they have poor reception, they should be able to put up a hotspot and make some money. And that really fundamentally struck us as the capitalist way to think about the problem, as opposed to now it's actually the very socialist way, which is what do the gods at AT&T headquarters think, without actually having real world feedback from people on the ground based on where they need coverage. So as we thought more about Helium, we really recognized a huge idea, and we ended up leading that investment in 2019. And then we immediately started looking for other teams kind of implementing the same idea. It took a few years, but as Helium started to take off and they built out a network of over 1 million hotspots, a lot of other people became inspired by the same idea. We led the investment in HiveMapper in 2021 on the same kind of basis. There's a whole bunch of other teams now doing really cool things like Demo, WeatherXM, who the WeatherXM guy was just here. A bunch of other teams building out really cool forms of physical infrastructure around these ideas. Helium and HiveMapper are probably the two biggest we've made that are focused on physical infrastructure, and then we've made a whole bunch focused on virtual infrastructure. Teams like Fluence, Graph, Filecoin, LivePeer. I'm sure I'm missing 4 or 5 more, but yeah, we've been very, very active.
And given you've been invested in the space, you've first heard of it in 2017, a long time ago, invested in 19. We're seeing the rest of the world catching up now, right? So Masari wrote a report just recently, Binance, OKX both wrote their own DePIN reports. What do you think is the kind of catalyst for the rest of the world talking about DePIN now as opposed to later or earlier?
Yeah, I think, I got into crypto in 2016 and launched Multicoin in 2017, and that's when Tom and I first met. And back then, the infrastructure just wasn't ready. L2s that wasn't even a word. Solana didn't exist. Cosmos didn't exist. Filecoin didn't exist. None of these things existed. Even in 2019, when we led our first investment in Helium, the Helium team built their own blockchain, and they ran it until 9 months ago when they migrated to Solana. But the reason they built their own blockchain was the infrastructure didn't exist. They couldn't run on Ethereum or anything else. And so it's really taken, the last 5 or 6 years to get the infrastructure to be mature enough to where entrepreneurs can focus just on, telecom and that part and not worry about the L1 or the L2 or whatever. It's really only been the last kind of couple of years we've been at the point where you can just take that infrastructure for granted. And now that we're at that point, we're seeing this real blossoming of DePIN founders who can say, okay, great, I don't have to think about the payments and the money movements. That all just works. and now they can really focus their energy on go-to-market. I think the other major thing that's really allowed DePIN to start to flourish in the last 12 or so months has been like people seeing Helium work, and now seeing, I think the next kind of wave has been this AI GPU compute thing, led by teams like Render and Akash and IONET and a bunch of others. But now that we have kind of two different examples, one really being physical infrastructure, telecom, and then the other being virtual infrastructure, looking at the GPU stuff and AI, I think that's now kind of opened up the window of the opportunity set in a lot of people's minds and has inspired a new wave of entrepreneurs to take that model and apply it to different problem spaces.
Excellent. And related to that, I guess Fluence is not current now. We've been around for a little while, and you invested in us a couple of years ago. Talk about a little bit what you saw in Fluence, in the team, in the project that kind of got you interested.
Yeah, so decentralized compute stuff is super, super hard. I mean, in anything in cloud, you've got three primitives: storage, compute, bandwidth. Of those, the hardest, in my opinion, to deal with in a permissionless setting is compute, because of the verifiability problem. It's super, super hard. And we met a ton of teams starting in 2017-16 timeframe, trying to do various compute things. There was a whole wave of early teams like Golem and iExec, and I can't even remember how many others there were. And we were pretty concerned that all of them were being a little bit too generalized in their approach. When I got to dig into Fluence with Evgeny and with Tom, two things really stuck out to us. First was building the entire stack from the ground up around the custom Aquamarine language, and recognizing that, like, hey, if you're going to make permissionless compute work in a global network like this, you're going to need to redesign the entire stack from the ground up. Everyone else we saw was like, oh, just take a WASM container and it'll work. And I was like, I don't think this is gonna map over. And so rethinking everything from first principles struck us as very important. And then the second thing that really stood out to us was the focus on kind of Lambda-style stateless compute, which again we thought was like, okay, you're not trying to solve all forms of compute in a generalized way. You're saying we're going to take one specific function, in this case, stateless compute, or serverless, or whatever, or now cloudless is the new modern lingo, and focus on that. When we first did Live Peer in 2017, 18, they were like, look, we're just focused on video streaming, and we liked, again, that you could deal with the verification problem in video streaming in clever ways, and we continue to like how the Fluence team has really focused on one kind of function of compute. So those are the two big things that stood out to us.
You've talked about the evolution of the space and now how you have more mature components that allow people to focus just on the sector or just on the problem they're trying to solve, because payments is good and solved. If you talk about compute going forward, do you see a world where the decentralized compute is the default choice for Web3 projects, where you will see, it is no longer, acceptable from a kind of cultural, even economic perspective to run on AWS? Is that something that you see possibility down the road?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think most of the kinds of founders who are building in crypto generally want to use crypto-centric tooling, as long as it's reasonably comparable to its Web2 counterparts. Another example I use is HiveMapper, because we're close with the HiveMapper team. They really want to store, they're capturing all of these images from cars driving around, and they really want to store it in a decentralized place. Right now, they're not quite there yet, so they're on S3, but like they've made it very clear that as a function of like the premise of what they do, hey, it's an open public map for the world, the data needs to be stored on a credibly neutral, permissionless backend. I think most of the teams who are building, whether they're front-end applications, DeFi applications, whatever you've got, I think they generally want to use decentralized counterparts where they can. Decentralized components are usually not quite as convenient to use as the Web 2 ones just yet, but I think in the next few years that will flip. And then you'll see the entire kind of Web3 ecosystem all using these decentralized components.
Excellent. Let's talk about AI for a second. I mentioned Google Gemini in my talk, and sort of kind of highlights the risks inherent in corporate driven and operate AI models. And you obviously invested in GPU networks for training models on that can be done in a decentralized way, and Fluence can run models on a decentralized way. How do you see the future of decentralized AI? Is it the future? Is it an alternative? Is it lots of models? Is one model? Can you sort of paint a decentralized AI future or lack thereof?
Yeah, so we haven't invested in any teams doing decentralized training. We have in 2 teams focusing on inference, Render and IONet. How do I think AI plays out? You're going to have big proprietary models from OpenAI and Google. Those are going to continue to be leading edge for the foreseeable future, just because the capital and financial capital and human capital requirements are so high. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. The ability to just pay, those guys are spending $1 billion a year on salaries just for all of the researchers. Let alone, people talk about the compute cost, but like they forget about the people part. Those models are very likely to be the top of the line for general purpose reasoning. And OpenAI and Google have both made it very clear they're here to build AGI. Maybe we get to full AGI, maybe we don't, who knows? Assuming we don't get to AGI, then the obvious opportunity is to take LLMs and tune them for all kinds of use cases. Most obviously, coding is clearly different from English language. Japanese boyfriend, girlfriend is clearly different than therapist, et cetera. And so you're obviously going to have these things tuned for these different types of use cases. In that sense, I suspect basically every model that's not attempting to be AGI is going to be open source, because you already have the foundations with Llama, with Mistral, with whatever the other ones are these days. There's enough reasoning in those, and then you can fork it off. And you see this pretty commonly with lots of other open source libraries, where there's a basic foundation, and then lots of teams fork it off to create kind of customized iterations of it. That's almost certainly going to be the case here with models as well.
And with just to follow this one more second on this, on the large ones, given the investment in human capital, which is obviously impossible to replicate at startup level, but if that capital is deployed in a way that makes the models kind of not obvious or sort of suspect, I guess, given some of the manipulation, does that reduce the use, or you think consumers won't care so much because they're still so much better that they're comfortable with, maybe some biases here and there and doesn't really matter?
Generally, I think most consumers won't care. Google obviously has a real big egg on their face from this past weekend, because obviously what they released was stupid. But like, they're going to iterate on it and fix it. I don't think they're that incompetent that they can't fix it. So I think they'll generally get there. Most people consume extremely biased news all day, every day, and they seem pretty happy with it. So I don't, telling people that, they need to have their AI model be like more neutral, I don't think is going to be terribly appealing to folks. I suspect over the next few years, we will probably get more verifiability of what is going into OpenAI's training and Gemini's training. Today, it's 100% black box. We have no idea, other than some very hand-wavy statements that the founders and CEOs make. I suspect that we're never going to get a perfectly granular list of them, of here's all of the domains, and here's all the web pages, and here's all the IPFS CIDs that we used to train it. I don't think we're going to get to that degree of granularity of transparency. But I do think we're within a few years, they'll be able to make fairly reasonable and fairly broad statements that will at least tell you, okay, it was trained on these kinds of things, it wasn't trained on this. Probably there'll be versions, maybe if you want to exclude too left-leaning or too right-leaning, like I can see multiple versions of these things coexisting with reasonable degrees of transparency out of the big AGI teams.
Excellent. Well, that's a more sanguine answer than I might have expected from someone investing in startups, but definitely good to hear. On decentralized compute, whether it's GPU based or CPU, kind of big picture, how do you think of that market size, that market scale down the road?
Infinite. There's a very good Jeff Bezos quote. The effective TAM for AWS is infinite. So I'm going to repeat Jeff Bezos.
Excellent. Well, you heard it here. Fluence market size is infinite. There we go. And what about DePIN overall? Is that infinite squared then?
Absolutely. I mean, if you get that, just adding telecom alone on top of AWS, I mean, telecom is $1 trillion of annual spend. So now we have infinite squared.
Excellent. These are going through these questions quickly and with the great answers. And so, what about you as a venture capitalist looking at DePIN? Are there areas you see that haven't been filled that you're looking for? How do you think about investing in the next generation of DePIN?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely certain areas in the physical infrastructure side we're spending a lot of cycles on. I think the area we're most interested in, although it's a very difficult market, is energy. Fairly obvious, but Powerwall, virtual power plants, demand response, all of these ideas have been floating around for quite some time. No one has cracked it. Obviously, it's going to be inherently regional. Texas is very different than New York, which is very different than Germany. So you're gonna have lots of regional players in that kind of a thing working on it. But we really want to make some plays in energy. We haven't made any yet. We definitely want to. Another really interesting area for physical infrastructure networks that we have looked at but we haven't done is third-party logistics. So think like Amazon warehouses kind of a thing. There's an idea that we've seen it floating around with a handful of entrepreneurs for like, hey, you live in a neighborhood, think like traditional suburbia neighborhood. You have a garage that's empty. Can you turn your garage into a warehouse and store? Can you have enough small-scale robots at a low enough price point with enough, computer vision and whatever else that you can basically get real estate storage for free in someone's garage and do last-mile delivery that way? Really, really crazy idea. Almost certainly still too early. Like, I think the tech's probably not there on all the AI stuff. Maybe you need drones to pull it off. Maybe you don't. I don't know. But like, that's an area that we've spent a lot of time on, even though it's still too early. But it's something we really want to see happen. Those are probably the two biggest markets we've spent a bunch of time on in the physical infrastructure side. On the virtual infrastructure side, there's a ton of pretty obvious opportunities. VPN, CDN, Zoom kind of a thing, video calling. Those all come to mind very obviously. There's going to be more segments just go look at basically every revenue line of AWS. That's every service line that's broken out. Almost all of those at some point can be decentralized in some form or fashion. So huge amounts of opportunity on the virtual infrastructure side.
Interesting. Can you talk a little bit also about regulatory risk? Do we have regulatory risk within DePIN? Is it different than crypto or not? Just general crypto regulatory risk? How do you think about that at all?
Is this being recorded or live streamed?
It's being streamed. I don't know who's on the other side.
Oh, okay, it is being streamed. Okay. Not your lawyer. I don't give legal advice, or life advice, or tax, or any other form of advice. Look, I think generally serve your customers, act in good faith, be above board, hire very good attorneys, and you can understand the risks you're taking. Nothing in life is risk-free. Launching a token is definitely not risk-free. Make sure you're comfortable with the risks you're taking. It is doable. Lots of people in this room have issued tokens for DePIN type things, such as Juan is standing over there, and I assume other people in this room also have launched tokens for DePIN things.
Lawyers, guns, and money. Another question. Obviously, you've started off by saying how long you've been in the space. Any lessons learned? Doesn't have to be DePIN specific, but either team specific or market specific or technological. Anything. I mean, you're sitting here with a lot of experience. You've invested in a lot of projects, backed a lot of founders. What can you kind of tell us about kind of that journey and what you've learned from it?
Definitely learned a lot of things. I'd say the one I'll choose to share here is be very clear about whatever unique insight you have about why your decentralized thing is better than the centralized counterparts. There's lots of decentralized things that are marginally better than their centralized counterparts and not 10x better. So be very clear about how and why you're 10x better. And
anything you would have done differently historically, not necessarily in investment, but anything else from, in the space in terms of, building your business, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean,
anything you tell teams to do differently, they always do wrong.
Yeah. What is a common mistake I see teams make? Here's one that is very mechanical and that really annoys me. Whenever you raise money and you do your PR and you announce, your fundraise, do not announce your valuation. This is a very silly thing. Founders always want to put the largest number out publicly, and the valuation is by definition the highest number, and that is absolutely very stupid. You should announce how much money you have raised, because that is a way to tell employees, potential employees, that you can pay them. So that's very important, but you do not need to announce your valuation. All you're doing by doing that is attracting more competitors. So very simple, tactical piece of advice for everyone.
Terrific. Well, also, lastly, you built a big, it's not a big team, but an incredibly skilled team with some very, super high quality people who we've worked with, across the board in your team, from JR to everybody. Is anything you have to give advice to people to attract kind of top people and retain them, whether it's on the venture side or the team side?
Yeah, I mean, to the extent you can build a brand that's known for standing for something, that will definitely help attract talent because of a function of self-selection. We are known for like hardcore thinking and writing theses and that kind of a thing, and we attract that kind of person, which naturally fits for investing. If you are, let's say, Protocol Labs, like you publish a bunch of videos and papers about research and leading edge cryptography and ZK game theory on how to make proof storage, that will attract those kinds of people. So I'd say, if you, to whatever extent you can, publish content that's very brand aligned. And the most important thing that will do is that will then create self-selection for attracting the kind of talent that is going to naturally excel at that.
Excellent. Well, listen, at Fluence, we really appreciate your support, appreciate you being here. So want to thank you again for everything. And I would like to give a big round of applause to Kyle Samani. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Tom.